In the quiet corners of our daily lives, there exists a profound truth that millions carry but rarely speak about. It surfaces in the space between heartbeats, in the pause before answering a simple question, in that split second when someone realizes they would rather take the longer route home than risk running into a neighbor. This truth isn't about hatred or misanthropy. It's about something far more complex and deeply human. Some people navigate the world feeling as though they're wearing an invisible weight, one that becomes heavier with each social interaction, each expectation to be on, each moment. They must translate their authentic selves into something more palatable for public consumption. They're not antisocial rebels rejecting humanity. They're highly sensitive individuals trying to preserve something precious within themselves while still connecting with the world around them. When most people walk into a crowded coffee shop, they might notice the general buzz of conversation, the aroma of fresh beans, perhaps the face of someone they recognize. But for others, this same environment becomes a symphony of overwhelming input. Their minds don't just register the obvious, they absorb the subtle tension in a stranger's voice 3 tables away, the micro-expressions of the barista who's clearly having a difficult day, the energy of every person who walks through the door carrying their own invisible burdens. This isn't a superpower or a disorder. It's simply a different way of processing the world. These individuals possess what researchers call high sensory processing sensitivity, a trait found in approximately 20% of the population. Their nervous systems are naturally calibrated to notice subtleties that others miss, to feel emotions more intensely, and to require more time to process experiences before moving on to the next one. Imagine trying to have a conversation while simultaneously monitoring dozens of radio frequencies, all broadcasting different information at varying volumes. This is what social interaction can feel like for someone whose emotional antenna picks up signals others never notice. The exhaustion that follows isn't from disliking people. It's from processing an overwhelming amount of human data that their brains simply cannot ignore. Every conversation carries what I call an emotional equation, a complex calculation that sensitive individuals perform automatically and often unconsciously. They assess the other person's mood, adjust their own energy accordingly, monitor for any signs of discomfort or disapproval, and continuously recalibrate their responses to maintain harmony. This process requires tremendous mental energy, yet it happens so naturally that even they might not realize they're doing it. Consider Sarah, a marketing professional who appears confident and articulate during meetings, but feels completely drained afterward. She's not an introvert in the traditional sense. She can engage, contribute, and even enjoy the interaction in the moment. But her mind is simultaneously running multiple programs. Is my idea being well received? Did that comment come across as intended? Is John looking uncomfortable? Should I speak up more or less? The cognitive load of managing these parallel processes, while also trying to be authentic and productive, can be exhausting. This emotional mathematics extends beyond professional settings. Even casual encounters with neighbors, interactions with service workers, or phone calls with family members can trigger the same complex calculations. It's not that these individuals are overthinking. They're simply processing more layers of information than most people realize exist in human interaction. One of the most painful aspects of this experience is what I call the authenticity paradox. Many highly sensitive people possess rich inner worlds filled with complex thoughts, creative ideas, and deep emotions. Yet when they try to share these authentic parts of themselves, they often find that others aren't equipped to receive them. Their genuine enthusiasm might be met with polite but distant smiles. Their thoughtful observations might be dismissed as overthinking. Their emotional depth might make others uncomfortable. Over time, they learn to present modified versions of themselves, versions that are more palatable, less intense, easier for others to digest. But this constant translation between their authentic self and their social self creates a profound sense of disconnection. They begin to feel like actors playing a role that never quite fits, performers in a show they never auditioned for. Marcus, a software engineer with a passion for philosophy, spent years trying to share his interests with colleagues during lunch breaks. He would bring up questions about consciousness, meaning, or the nature of human connection, only to watch eyes glaze over or conversations quickly shift to safer topics like weekend plans or popular television shows. Eventually, he stopped trying. It wasn't that he looked down on others for their interests. He simply grew tired of feeling like his authentic self was somehow too much for public consumption. Highly sensitive individuals often operate under different energy economics than the general population. Where others might gain energy from social interaction, they frequently find it depleting. This isn't because they dislike people, it's because their systems are working harder during every interaction, processing more information, and managing more variables than others typically handle. Think of it like the difference between driving a fuel-efficient car and driving a high-performance sports car. Both can get you where you need to go, but one requires significantly more fuel to operate. The sports car isn't broken or inferior, it's simply designed differently, with capabilities that come at a higher energy cost. This energy differential creates a challenging dynamic in relationships. Friends might interpret someone's need for alone time as rejection. Partners might feel shut out when their significant other requires space to recharge. Family members might view someone's preference for quiet evenings at home as antisocial behavior. The highly sensitive person finds themselves in the impossible position of either depleting their energy reserves to meet others' expectations, or protecting their energy and risking misunderstanding and conflict. Many people who struggle with typical social interactions aren't actually antisocial. They're seeking a different kind of connection altogether. They prefer what researchers call high-quality, low-quantity relationships. Rather than maintaining large networks of casual acquaintances, they gravitate toward deep, meaningful connections with a select few individuals who understand and appreciate their authentic selves. These individuals often find small talk particularly challenging, not because they think it's beneath them, but because surface-level interactions don't provide the emotional nutrients they need from human connection. They're like people with specific dietary requirements, trying to satisfy their hunger at a restaurant that only serves food they can't properly digest. The food isn't bad, but it doesn't meet their particular needs. When they do find someone who can engage with them on a deeper level, someone who appreciates thoughtful conversation, comfortable silences, and authentic emotional exchange, they often become incredibly loyal and connected friends or partners. Their social circles might be small, but the relationships within them tend to be profound and lasting. The human nervous system has evolved sophisticated mechanisms for dealing with threats and challenges. For highly sensitive individuals, social situations can sometimes trigger these same protective responses, not because people are actually dangerous, but because the sheer volume of social and emotional information can overwhelm their processing systems. When someone with high sensitivity enters a crowded, noisy environment, their nervous system might respond as if they're facing a genuine threat. Their heart rate increases, stress hormones flood their system, and their body prepares for fight, flight, or freeze responses. This physiological reaction isn't a choice or a weakness. It's an automatic response to what their system perceives as overwhelming stimulation. Understanding this biological component helps explain why some people feel an almost physical need to limit their social exposure. They're not being dramatic or antisocial. They're responding to genuine physiological signals that too much stimulation is harmful to their well-being. Just as someone with a physical sensitivity might need to avoid certain foods or environments, emotionally sensitive individuals might need to limit their social exposure to maintain their health and equilibrium. When highly sensitive people begin to limit their social interactions, others often interpret this as rejection, depression, or antisocial behavior. In reality, this withdrawal is usually a form of self-care, a necessary step in maintaining their emotional and mental health. They're not pulling away because they don't care about others. They're creating space because they care too much and need time to process all the emotional information they've absorbed. This withdrawal often follows a predictable pattern. After periods of intense social interaction, sensitive individuals might need extended alone time to digest their experiences. They replay conversations, analyze interactions, process emotions, and allow their nervous systems to return to baseline. This isn't rumination or obsession. It's a necessary part of their emotional metabolism. Unfortunately, our society often interprets this need for processing time as problematic. We value people who can move quickly from one social situation to another without apparent effect. We admire those who seem energized by constant interaction and stimulation. This cultural bias can make sensitive individuals feel defective or abnormal, when in reality they're simply operating according to a different but equally valid psychological blueprint. Over time, many highly sensitive people develop what I call a protective distance strategy. They learn to engage with others from a safe emotional distance, maintaining pleasant but not particularly deep relationships with most people. This strategy allows them to function socially without completely depleting their energy reserves, but it can also create a sense of chronic loneliness and disconnection. This protective distance might manifest as being friendly, but not particularly available, engaging in conversations, but not sharing personal information, or maintaining social connections that feel pleasant, but somehow hollow. It's a compromise between their need for human connection and their need for emotional self-preservation. The challenge with this strategy is that it can become so automatic that it's difficult to lower the protective barriers, even when safe, understanding people enter their lives. They might find themselves keeping everyone at arm's length out of habit, even when genuine intimacy is possible and desired. At its core, the experience of highly sensitive people in social situations is often a search for emotional safety, environments and relationships where they can exist authentically without overwhelming stimulation or the need for constant self-monitoring. They're not looking for isolation. They're looking for connection that doesn't require them to diminish or modify themselves to be acceptable. Emotional safety might look like a friend who doesn't take their occasional need for space personally, a partner who appreciates their depth rather than finding it overwhelming, or a work environment that values their thoughtful contributions rather than expecting constant verbal participation. When they find these safe spaces and relationships, their social difficulties often diminish significantly. The tragedy is that many sensitive individuals spend years believing the problem is with them, that they need to somehow become more like everyone else to be worthy of connection. In reality, they simply need to find their people, those who appreciate sensitivity, depth, and authenticity, rather than viewing these qualities as problematic or excessive. While high sensitivity can create challenges in social situations, it also offers unique gifts that enhance relationships when properly understood and appreciated. Highly sensitive individuals often make exceptional friends, partners, and colleagues because of their capacity for deep empathy, their attention to subtle emotional cues, and their appreciation for meaningful connection. They notice when others are struggling, often before the struggling person has fully acknowledged their difficulty. They remember important details about people's lives, hopes, and fears. They create space for others to be authentic and vulnerable because they understand the courage it takes to show up genuinely in a world that often rewards performance over authenticity. In romantic relationships, their depth of feeling and capacity for intimacy can create profound connections that transcend surface-level compatibility. They don't just fall in love with someone's public persona, they fall in love with the full complexity of another human being, shadows and light alike. The key is finding people who recognize and appreciate these gifts, rather than viewing them as burdens or complications. When sensitive individuals connect with others who value depth, authenticity, and emotional intelligence, their relationships often become extraordinarily rich and meaningful. Perhaps it's time to reframe the narrative around people who claim to dislike people. Instead of viewing them as antisocial or problematic, we might see them as individuals with specific social and emotional needs that our culture doesn't always accommodate. They're not broken introverts who need to be fixed. They're sensitive individuals navigating a world designed for different sensory and emotional processing styles. This reframing has practical implications. Instead of pushing sensitive individuals to be more social or outgoing, we might focus on helping them find environments and relationships where their authentic selves are welcome. Instead of interpreting their need for space as rejection, we might recognize it as necessary self-care. Instead of viewing their small social circles as limitation, we might appreciate their commitment to meaningful connection over superficial networking. For those who don't experience high sensitivity themselves, understanding begins with recognizing that people process social and emotional information differently. What feels energizing to one person might feel overwhelming to another. What seems like overthinking might actually be thorough processing. What appears to be antisocial behavior might be careful boundary-setting. This understanding benefits everyone. When sensitive individuals feel accepted and accommodated, they're more likely to share their unique perspectives and contributions. When others learn to appreciate different social styles, communities become more inclusive and diverse in their approaches to connection and collaboration. The goal isn't to change sensitive people to fit better into existing social structures. It's to expand our understanding of healthy human diversity and create space for different ways of being in the world. The most transformative experience for many highly sensitive people is finding others who share their preferences for depth, authenticity, and meaningful connection. These relationships don't require constant energy management or self-modification. Instead, They provide the emotional nutrients that sensitive individuals need to thrive. These connections might be found in unexpected places. A book club focused on philosophy, a volunteer organization aligned with their values, an online community centered around shared interests, or simply through the gradual deepening of an existing relationship. When both parties commit to authenticity over social performance, when sensitive individuals find their people, something beautiful happens. Their apparent dislike of people reveals itself to have been a longing for the right people all along. Their social difficulties diminish when they're in environments that honor their processing style. Their withdrawn behavior transforms into engaged participation when they feel truly seen and appreciated. The ultimate truth about people who claim to dislike people is that they're often the ones who care most deeply about authentic human connection. Their apparent antisocial tendencies usually mask a profound desire for relationships that honor the full complexity of human experience. They don't want to live behind emotional walls forever. They want to find people who make those walls unnecessary. Their journey isn't about learning to like people more. It's about finding people who like them as they are. It's not about becoming more social. It's about finding forms of socialization that nourish rather than deplete them. It's not about changing their sensitive nature. It's about finding environments where sensitivity is valued rather than problematic. When this happens, when they find their people and their places, the transformation can be remarkable. The person who once claimed to dislike people becomes someone who loves deeply, connects authentically, and contributes uniquely to the lives of those around them. They discover that they never actually disliked people at all. They were simply waiting for the right people to find them. In a world that often moves too quickly and demands too much surface-level interaction, these individuals serve as important reminders of what's possible when we slow down, go deeper, and prioritize authenticity over performance. They're not the problem to be solved. They're the solution to our epidemic of shallow connection and emotional disconnection. Their message is simple but profound. Meaningful human connection is possible, but it requires patience, understanding, and the courage to be authentically ourselves with one another. For those willing to meet them in that authentic space, the rewards are immeasurable. Relationships characterized by depth, loyalty, and genuine understanding that can last a lifetime. Perhaps the world would be a richer place if we all learned something from those who claim to dislike people. That quality matters more than quantity, that depth is more valuable than breadth, and that true connection requires the courage to show up authentically, especially when that authenticity doesn't match everyone else's expectations.